So welcome back to Chess Puzzles. So the position we're looking at right now is actually taken from the U.S. Championship in 1980 between Bradford and Sarwan. Now it's Black's turn to play. Can you see the best move for Black here to take advantage of the position here to either win material? Really, that's what we're looking at here, winning material. What I'll give you as a hint here is you see this bishop here on c4 is very vulnerable because it's not being guarded by any piece. So can you see the best move here for Black? Okay, so here's the best move here. Black is actually going to take his knight right here on g4 and slide it right over here, attacking the bishop and the queen. Now White's response here, in order not to lose this bishop here, would be obviously to capture with this pawn now. After capturing with that pawn, this piece is unguarded by anything, and the knight here on c6 can go ahead and come in here and capture, and now fork over the queen and the bishop. The queen here is forced to move. After the queen moves, Black can come in here and capture the bishop, and as a result, Black was able to win a pawn in this position, and even more importantly has a very promising bishop now that's being activated by this long diagonal here. So let's move on to the next puzzle in this series. So looking at this position, it's White's move to play. You can see the best move here for White to try to win material. Okay, so now for the solution. Notice that this pass pawn for White is very dangerous. And the only thing that's really blocking it at the moment is Black's pawn here on b7. If White is to capture this knight, Black would be forced to recapture, capture White's rook, because he doesn't want to just give away his knight. And as a result, this free space now is available for White to push his pawn forward more, creating a fork between this rook and checking the king. The king is forced to move, and now White can capture, get his queen, and Black would be forced to recapture. And a result in that position, White only lost a pawn and his rook, but as a result, Black lost even more material because he lost a rook and he's lost his knight, giving White now a 2-point material advantage. So let's look at this next puzzle. So this puzzle actually comes from a position from a championship game in 1957 in Budapest between Kikovic and Fornidos. And it's White's turn to play here. Can you see the best move here for White to take advantage of the position here? So what White's going to do now for the solution, he's going to take a rook here on c1 and capture this bishop. As a result, White or Black has to recapture with his rook. Notice it would be a blunder if Black were to capture with his king here. Then White's rook could come in here and basically win his rook outright from Black. So that would be a blunder from Black. Therefore, in this position, Black is forced to recapture with his rook. Now, White has the advantage of pushing this pawn forward now and having a nasty fork between Black's rook and his knight, with his bishop no longer guarding the square. Right here, this d7 square is now vulnerable for Black. Now Black is forced to recapture with his king. Notice again, this would be a blunder if Black were to, say, move to c7. White now could come in here and take his pawn right here and promote it to a queen, and Black would be forced to recapture, and Black would be down a lot of material in this position. So in this position, Black is forced to recapture with his king. And now we can have a nasty skewer here with White's bishop moving to the square on g4 and having a really nice diagonal attack on White's king and rook. So black is now forced to hide away his king to d8, and black's bishop can come in here and capture this rook. And in this position, black actually resigned, knowing that he cannot recapture this bishop, because then that would leave this knight undefended. If we were to take a look right here, black recaptures this rook and come in. So therefore, in this position, black actually chose to resign. Hopefully you got that puzzle, because it was quite frustrating even for me to try to figure out initially. So now on to another puzzle, being a slightly more difficult here in this position. So if we look over here now, all these squares are here. There's a big jumble of mess with pins happening and a lot of things, which means there's a lot of possibilities here for white to take advantage of in this position. Now, do you see the best solution here for white to try to win material, or to see if you could checkmate black? Now it might look quite promising maybe if you were to play have a queen exchange, right? You capture black's queen, the rook would slide over here to recapture, and now you could set up a fork between these two rooks with this knight, but black could recapture with his knight, white could come and capture this rook, and black recaptures. Now this position would not be very advantageous for white. White essentially exchanged one of his rooks and gave black two spare pieces, and two knights are always favored greater than one rook, which is really only worth 5 points in material, while these two knights are worth 3 points individually. So there is a better move here in this position. Actually, the best move here for white is actually would be sacrificing his queen, which might look a little odd initially. Why white's going to do that? But white now, the black king here is now forced to recapture. But the great thing now is when black moved to this very dangerous f8 square, because now its knight right here is pinned. It can't move because of the bishop on h6. This frees up the square here on e6 for white's knight to jump here, not allowing this knight to recapture it. Now there's a fork between the queen and the king. The king now is forced to move. After the king moves, white can now capture black's queen. The rook can come over here, and as a result now, white was actually able to win one of black's rooks in exchange for one of his knights, giving white here a 2-point material advantage. And as you can see, this position is more advantageous than the position we saw initially, where black had just the two knights here. In this position, two rooks are always more superior than just black having one rook and his two knights. So for the final puzzle in this series, the fifth one being the hardest. Now this position right here is taken from a 1967 tournament in San Juan between two grandmasters at the time, Rosolimo and Riesman. And as white's move to play, and can you see the best position for white to either win material or try to checkmate? I just want to warn you guys initially that the moves that are going to be happening here are very unusual. So if there's any hint here, think of something quite unusual for an attack. So now for the solution here. The knight here on e4 is actually going to jump over to this square on f6, and notice how black cannot recapture with this pawn now, but at the same time his king is in check, so he is forced to move to only square available here is h8. Now comes probably the most interesting move here in this entire combination. The queen is actually going to slide over to g6. Now in this position it looks like black could easily just gobble up with either of these two pawns here, but actually both of those would result in a loss for black if we take a look. Let's say this pawn on f7 here is captures. Well, now white can take his knight, play it here, capture that pawn, putting the king in check. Now black is forced to recapture with his pawn. The rook can slide over to h3, and now checkmate for black. Now let's say that black decided to recapture with this pawn. Well, it's the same result now. The white's knight can come in here and recapture this pawn. Again, the king's in check. He is forced to recapture with his pawn. And again, this rook can slide over to h3 and checkmate for the king. Therefore, capturing with either of these two pawns that we saw here are not viable options for black. Therefore, black in the game, black played his queen to c2, because again he doesn't want even white's queen is attacking this h7 square with the assistance of this knight, so he has to defend that square. So in this position, white disregarded this counterattack from black and just slid his rook here to h3, putting more pressure on this h7 square. Now black here is forced to recapture with the possibility of checkmate coming, so he captures with his queen, and in this position it's still a losing battle for black. Now the knight can come over here and recapture, and in this position black has only one option to capture with this pawn here on f7. Notice how this pawn on h7 cannot recapture because it would open to check from this rook on h3. So only one viable option. The pawn comes here to capture, and the rook can slide him here to h7 and checkmate the king. And it is a losing battle for black, and he's checkmated in the end. And if you got this answer, well, give yourself a pat on the back, because this puzzle was very difficult and very challenging in that regard too. So congratulations if you did get it right.